I'm Hindol Sengupta. I'm delighted that Mr. Akbar has joined us in conversation today. Mr. Akbar needs no introduction. He's an eminent public intellectual, long-standing journalist, author of many books, including one very interesting book on Mughals and their fascination and astrology of all things. I didn't know much about that until I read Mr. Akbar's book. I'm delighted that Mr. Akbar has joined us. Also, I must say, Mr. Akbar very kindly is also the chair of the Board of Global Order, the Board of Advisors of Global Order. Thanks very much, Mr. Akbar, for joining me today. We would like to discuss a whole range of things with you, but of course, at the center of it all, the Iran war. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Hindol.
I want to begin with a broad question, sir. At the present juncture, it seems like a strange, bitter stalemate. The talks are not moving forward between America, Israel, and Iran. Things are getting more protracted. You have given interviews talking about Israeli reaction to the missiles hitting Dimona, where it is said that most of their nuclear assets are. How do you see the present moment in this conflict? Where do you think it is going?
First, let me just analyze the words you've used, Hindol. You used bitterness. Bitterness existed before the war. In fact, bitterness was the cause of the war. Suspicion was the cause of the war. And the inability of Iran to what might be called to join what might be called the American Protocol on Oil and Energy Flows was one of the principal reasons, as we all know, for this. But that conflict has been going on, and that conflict has induced, under President Trump, brief flashes of war, but nothing as sustained as the present engagement. The second, you mentioned the peace talks, and you mentioned America, Israel, and Iran. I think it is very important at this moment to understand one of the most significant developments of this war. The war began when Israel and America launched an attack on Tehran. In the first few hours, they eliminated the top leadership of Tehran. They announced that regime change was their declared objective. Obviously not the full objective, but at least the declared objective. And now we come to a moment when at least one side is exhausted, seemingly so. And we have had peace talks or perhaps a peace break, a ceasefire break rather than talks. There haven't been much by way of talks. The most important point of the talks in Islamabad is that Israel is missing from the table. Israel is not in these talks. Israel has actually been kind of sidelined into a conversation which may or may not result in peace with Lebanon. And one can see the frustration of Israel at its absence from the table. In fact, it is the missing presence which is having a kind of a collateral presence, but it's not in the main talks. The conversation, the dialogue is between Iran and America. It's as simple and as straight as that. Pakistan is a kind of facilitator, and it's there only because both the White House and the Pentagon trust Pakistan to be obedient when necessary. So the state of the talks at the moment and the ceasefire at the moment, as we speak, President Trump has extended the ceasefire to an indefinite period. And in fact, this is the best evidence of, I think, exhaustion on one side. I think the American appetite now for continued military engagement at the intense levels to which President Trump seems magnetically or genetically drawn has gone. There is a very interesting assessment made by a very serious journal that one reason for this may not be a sudden desire for peace on earth, but simply the fact that the American arsenal now has been depleted beyond its ability to fight. The Americans over the last 10 years, uh, and particularly after the Russian attack on Ukraine, the Russians have been sending arms to Ukraine. Sorry, the Americans have been sending arms to Ukraine at a very frenetic pace. The Ukraine now is the principal importer of arms for any country in the world, and those arms have come from America. What has changed is that under President Biden, the Ukrainians virtually got a free ride, but President Trump is making them pay. Europe is picking up the bill on behalf of Ukraine, but still, the fact of the matter is that American missile strength, American arsenal strength is hugely depleted. We know this for a fact because in the midst of the war, America ordered its top arms manufacturers for new missile ranges, including THAAD. One of the successes of the Iranians has been their ability to hit the THAAD missile system. I mean, hurting its credibility greatly. Um, the second was a story in which America began urging its automobile manufacturers to start cooperating with defense manufacturers to speed up the process of rearmament. So you can see clearly that America's generals have told their president that a sustained war is no longer feasible. And the Iranians, for Iranians, victory means avoiding defeat. And since the Iranians have shown the capacity to avoid defeat, they at the moment have the advantage. But in any war situation, I'm always careful about the choice and use of words. We have to say at the moment. We cannot know what the future, immediate, medium term, or long term future holds for the region. But what I can say is that this brinkmanship that is going on is very toxic, very dangerous, and the brinkmanship and the various announcements of blockades can continue hurting the world economy and the economy of nations like ours, India, China, Japan, far as significantly as if the war was in progress.
I want to pick up a small point in what you just said and then go on to my next major question. You spoke about depletion of missiles in America. One of the questions, one of the sub questions many people have asked is how is it that Iranian, Iranian missile structure, or the number of missiles Iran seems to be able to produce, or it has, does not seem to be depleting quite in the manner that people had assumed. What do you think is the gap of understanding there?
The world, I think America did Iran a huge, huge favor by imposing sanctions. It made Iran self reliant. And it made Iran self reliant in a very critical area, which is defense. The Iranians also uh, created a war strategy which was much more modern than the Pentagon's war strategy. The Pentagon, I think sometimes, I'm not an expert on this, but it seems that the Pentagon is still doing variations of World War II. It's still doing variations, if you want to go back to the madman theory of Richard Nixon of Vietnam. And the Iranians had moved ahead by producing $20,000 drones, Shahid drones, which required on the American side $3 million missiles to intercept. Number two, the capacity of a drone swarm
Yes.
has been underestimated by the conventional military thinkers. And I know certainly that every conflict after this one will concentrate on drone swarms. And I think everybody is busy redrawing their map already, even as we speak. Third, the Iranian ability to hit American targets was vastly underestimated. The West refused to believe that under the present Islamic regime, physics could be a subject which Iranian middle class would continue to learn. People forget that Iran has 2,000 universities. People forget that Tehran is one city with perhaps, it is said, the largest number of PhDs and not bogus PhDs, right? And people forget that for decades now, Iran has been spending nearly 4% of its GDP on R&D. Iran has been preparing for this war for a very long time. If Iran has created underground bunker cities which are beyond the reach now of heavy American and Israeli bombardment. And most, I think, devastating of all to the structure of security that has been created in the region, Iran has shown the capacity to destroy, pierce, penetrate the so-called Iron Dome, which was Israel had always advertised as invincible. And these Iron Domes were basically created, among other things, by the THAAD missile system, which was
Yes.
America's greatest weaponry achievement, along with the F-35, the stealth bomber. Once Iran showed the capacity to hit the Al Udeid base, to hit Dimona. Dimona was hit deliberately in order to send a signal that Israel's nuclear assets were within its targeting state. But of course, they, and very correctly so, they did not extend it to an actual hit on the system. And the third, of course, is the ability to get the stealth bomber. Once the F-35 became vulnerable, and the Iranians did it, apparently the F-35 is quote unquote undetectable because it disperses the radar which seeks to find it. And by the time it appears on the enemy's radar screen, it is so tiny, it's almost invisible. What the Iranians did apparently was simply devise a missile which would seek heat rather than seek uh, the location of this. And once it seeks heat, any supersonic aircraft generates huge amounts of heat. And that was why they got it on. The point is here that I think a serious mistake was made in underestimating Iran's capability. And now the Iranians are confident enough to state that that their ability to continue the war again is being underestimated. We can't know the truth, of course, because only reality will uncover what happens. But Iran's claims are no longer incredible. We have to give the credibility factor of Iran's claims has risen. And this is very interesting because in the short, brief war of 2025, Iran's missiles and so on had not achieved the kind of accuracy that they did this time. Again, the voices that were emerging from Tehran was they didn't believe that was the serious war. And they used up the comparatively dud missiles and expended it. Of course, some historian 5 years later will probably tell us the facts of what happened. But these are the assumptions, and this is the evidence on which now the world must approach Iran. I may add that the New York Times, which not a newspaper known to be friendly to the Islamic regime, carried an op-ed about a week ago, recognizing that after this war, Iran may have become a major world power. I don't believe that Iran has become a world power, but certainly Iran has become a very, very effective, important regional power.
Therefore, let me ask you, the fact that we were told at the beginning of this conflict that this would once again, I feel like, I've grown up in an era we keep being told that this is going to be a short conflict, and it never is. Uh, and once again, we were told that this is going to be a short conflict. The America will go in, Israel will go in, it'll get sorted in a few days, and so on and so forth. The fact that America and Israel have not been able to get to their strategic goals in this conflict very quickly as they had assumed, or at least they had projected. How does this change the power balance in West Asia?
Oh, it changes it completely because the security structure of the Gulf, which was built on the assumption that you just said, is now destroyed. And we can already hear the voices from UAE saying that the American umbrella was discovered to be very, very leaky indeed. The Saudis have discovered it. Prince the Sultan base has been repeatedly hit. Right? The Saudis, the Kuwaitis, the Bahrainians, I mean, they don't know where to look in real terms. I saw one figure which sounds astronomical, but it's probably true given the prices American arms manufacturers charge, that they spent $142 billion on the THAAD system alone. Now, these huge expenditures have reached a point where, they've proved that American arms were overpriced and underperforming. And one consequence of that is that the Pakistani troops now are there in Saudi Arabia, and I believe they might be headed towards Qatar as well, in order to protect these two Gulf countries from an Iranian land invasion. You can already see that confidence in American bases as being the shield is gone. So, this is where we are at the moment. The next 3 years are going to be very intense. And in fact, one of the questions before India, before us, is what part do we play in the reconstruction of security in that region, the reconstruction of confidence in the region, the reconstruction of the economic confidence in the region as much as the military confidence in the region. Which country can be a bridge between this binary division of West Asia? Uh, you remember one thing, epic wars are continual, they may not be continuous. And this is an epic war, it hasn't ended. So all you have is patches of ceasefire, and we will probably see a patch of ceasefire. We don't know uh, when, how long it will last, but it probably lasts because there is no way that American rearmament can get back put Pentagon on a confidence level before 3 to 5 years. So I think we had, and by that time, of course, the occupant of the White House will change. The dynamics will be different. We shall see how the world evolves. But definitely, I think India has to have a place on the table where the future is being mapped out.
Ask you again a sub question before I go into the other larger question. Obviously, in this architecture that has got devastated, I want to talk about the role of these sort of city states, Dubai, for instance, which had become in many ways a home for so many Indians and so much of Indian wealth. We had come to a point where every other person one would meet in Bombay or Delhi or Bangalore would say that they wanted to buy their next home in Dubai. Now that has, it since come crashing down. Dubai real estate rates are flattening at a level. Do you think in some senses there has been an irretrievable damage to the Dubai dream, or do you think this is momentary and it could come back powerfully again?
It will not come back until the Gulf finds a level, an equilibrium. That is the only word I can think of with Iran. I think we need to understand that. We know in a very fundamental sense, Iran and the Gulf, the Arab Gulf, know that, the Gulf countries in the Arab countries in the Gulf both know that oil is impotent without water, and oil is the lifeblood of the region. Both know that the Hormuz Straits, the whole war has become about Hormuz Straits. It is the most tragic irony, but the Hormuz Straits were open all the time. Nobody had ever closed them. Nobody had even thought of closing them. It was not in anyone's interest to close. To convert a the war now into a struggle for the Hormuz Straits must be that must be a joke beyond laughter. So anyway, we are where we are, and I think in future to create the new equilibrium. Well, I think no one is going to stop arming themselves. Without that, confidence will not return. Uh, those who always have believed that some foreign haven is better than their own nation are going to get a jolt. But I suppose they are rich enough to bear more than one jolt in their lives. Uh, they there will be strong consequences in areas like investment, for example, real estate investment, and so on. And my own uh, opinion, it can't be more than that, is that there will probably be a surge of investment along the west coast of India as real estate money looks for different havens.
Let me ask you to zoom out a little bit and ask you, in a broader sense, Mr. Akbar, why do you think Iran proved to be so resilient? I mean, this is the country that had been, in many ways, plagued by sanctions for a long time. It had a very, again, a very bitter populace yearning to, in a sense, throw away, or at least that's what it seemed, to throw away the gauntlet, as it were, of the Islamic regime. There were people after Mahsa Amini's death. There were thousands of people on the roads. There were constant protests. There was this sense that a real upsurge was happening. And yet, Iran in this war proved to be so resilient. I mean, Donald Trump used to tweet, talking directly to the Iranian people, so to speak, that stay in your houses until we tell you to come out and take over. But that never happened. This takeover that everybody believed, especially in the West, that people are looking to throw out the Iranian regime, the Islamic regime, never actually happened. Why do you think this resilience, or why do you think the Iranian regime and Iran overall has this resilience, or had this resilience?
I am quite amazed, and only people who have never visited Iran would have had the good fortune of visiting it many times. How people undervalued and ignored Iranian nationalism. It is quite astounding. Iran is a civilizational state, and it has not abandoned its civilization. The successor now, Supreme Commander Mustafa Khamenei, he gave his first address to his people. Do you know when? During Navroz. No, Navroz is a New festival which is civilizational. They have a long, more than a week's holiday still. Every year they celebrate the spring festival, just as Basant is celebrated here, or Ugadi is celebrated, and so on and so forth. Uh, Iran uh, and the importance of making a statement at that time. Iran has consistently used icons from its pre-Islamic past in order to encourage, become a symbol of nationalism. For example, there was a rally before the war began in Tehran, and the present regime used an image of a Iranian king who had taken the surrender of the Roman Empire. And that is source of great pride. It's there. The Iranians have very, very strong civilizational roots, which they believe in. They believe that they were under foreign occupation for 900 years, and the present sort, if you would like to call it, the Shia face of Iranian nationalism really came to the fore in the first decade of the 16th century, because a Shia regime came and reunited Iran, and I think made Shiism synonymous with Iranian identity in its modern phase. Before that, it was not a completely Shia country. But this revival, and then the concept of martyrdom that Shiism has, which is very strong in its iconography because of Karbala and the tragedy of Karbala and so on. All these are inspirational springboards which revive the people. And in fact, the government was, as you say, tottering. The invasion by Israel and America has simply revived the credibility of the present regime. And it will now, I think, find its way forward after the present crisis abates. I don't say ends, it abates. Because, of course, they must correct the economic policies and so on and so forth. And I think they have the wisdom to be able to do so. We shall see what happens. But at the moment, in no circumstances should we run. I am reminded that India's greatest military triumph, right, which was the 1970 war, I'm talking in modern terms, coincided with the period of maximum economic unrest in India, right? Particularly after 72. And we were then a poor country. But when Indian nationalism was aroused, the people became united under the flag. Always remember, Hindol, we are one country in India because we are one people. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, without
Yeah.
doubt. I want to ask you, what do you make as the Iranian regime goes forward, Mr. Akbar, since you know the country well? Do you think the social upheaval that was happening in Iran, do you think there would be moderation there? Do you think the Islamic regime would now feel that some sort of a middle path has to be found in order for it to survive, considering the circumstances?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In fact, while the hardline reactions from Iran may consume all the coverage, the fact of the matter, there are very many sensible voices which say that we must save the economy of Iran. We must save it for the people. So, continued war is not necessarily a very good thing. These voices are part of the establishment. They are not outside the establishment. So, just like in any government, in fact, perhaps more than in any government, while the regime may look kind of unipolar under one supreme leader and so on and so forth, in real fact, I mean, there are multiple voices within the establishment arguing the case. But I think the Iranian government would not be so foolish as to forget the uprising, particularly of the middle class and in the
Yes.
cities. Uh, the war may have diverted attention from that, but that is, too is a reality, and the government must address it.
Let's turn our gaze to Pakistan, which is the other question I wanted to ask. This entire thing about Pakistan's role as a peacemaker and the revival of its geopolitical fortune, so to speak. I saw unconfirmed, but reports suggesting that in some calculations, Pakistan is now, quote unquote, part of MENA and not South Asia. Now, all of this has, in a sense, been said before also, and perhaps some in Pakistan believe it. In your opinion, when you see this in a sense, revitalized, or at least the propagation of the revitalized role of Pakistan in geopolitics. What do you make of it? How do you see this proceed?
You know, Pakistan is ruled by the army. That is, I think, an incontrovertible fact. What is the difference between a civilian government and an army government? A civilian government has to justify its presence and then ask for votes on the basis of what good it has done for the people. An army justifies its presence by hyping up the power of the enemy and by turning the enemy into the threat from which it can protect the nation. So when the threat doesn't exist, India has never been a country which has believed in aggression. But when the threat doesn't exist, it has to create the threat. Does it through terrorism, which became the principal policy of General Zia's 11-year regime of internal despotism and external uh, sort of influence. Don't forget that Pakistan probably reached the height of its influence during the Afghan war, when it became America's renewed ally and extended its support. Third, Pakistan has always sought to break all links with the subcontinent and position itself as a Gulf or a West Asia geopolitically rather than a subcontinental uh, presence. It's an anomaly, it's an aberration, and it won't work because the people belong to the subcontinent. They don't belong to the West. But that's what drive is. Today, the Pakistani army now has found a new role as the policeman of the Gulf or the military police of the Gulf. And I presume that they are saying that this is their way to also avoid the continued economic collapse, which it's a teetering country. But uh, I don't, Pakistan's role as a mediator in this present war, I think should not be overestimated because the real dialogue is going on between Iran and America. There is no third voice in the room. You need a venue because Iranians cannot go to America and Americans cannot go to Iran. During the Vietnam War, Henry Kissinger met his Vietnamese counterpart in Paris. That is the convenient. But Paris was not, and France had no part to play in the negotiations. When the Nobel Peace Prize was given to Dr. Henry Kissinger and his Vietnamese counterpart, I apologize for forgetting his name, uh, after the peace talks succeeded, nobody from France turned up to say that they needed to be part of it also. That was immature. France was a venue because of geopolitical opinions. I also believe that the Americans have chosen Pakistan because it's a one place where Israel will not, and they didn't want Israel at the table. One of the consequences of the war is clearly the growing distance between the American interest and the Israeli interest. Hillary Clinton has already made a very powerful statement saying that the Israel may have hurt itself very badly by its behavior in the last year. We shall see what happens clearly. But
I
I'm
think
saying
this pressure,
voices.
do you think this, there's always been bipartisan consensus on Israel in
Correct.
America and on the Beltway. Do you think that bipartisan consensus is starting to, if not break, at least get frayed, as it were, or getting frayed at the edges?
Afraid, of course, and it's not only the Democrats. I think the MAGA base also is beginning to question Israel's behavior because as long as the interests of both countries mirror each other, all is fine. I mean, America will also go the extra mile because it cannot depend on anyone in that region more than it can depend on Israel. And Israel has always shown proven military capability. All that is under question, including Israel's military capability. And I think the in the middle of the war, for the IDF chief to say that the army needed 100,000 extra troops because it was tired, it is fatigued. Right? He recognizes the ground realities. These are young boys and girls who are in the front line. they are paying a huge price, mental health price, as much as in the physical price. So the strain is beginning to show on the face of Israel's leaders. Uh, Popular opinion polls that are coming out clearly show the opposition to be significantly ahead. And election is also due, I think, by autumn. So we could, I mean, I'm not being facetious, but by autumn, there could be regime change in Tel Aviv and certainly regime damage in Washington after the uh, next elections to the American House of Representatives and the Senate.
I want to ask you about China's role in all of this. There's been a lot of speculation about where China stands, what it is making of this conflict, what it is taking away, why it is not intervening more. What has been China's role in pushing Pakistan to the forefront? How they are perhaps using backdoor channels to deal with both the Israelis and perhaps the Americans. Could you tell me a little bit about how you see China's role? Also, of course, what China is taking away from all of this about its own intentions about Taiwan.
Uh, President Xi, I think let's dilute the China discussion to President Xi because now he has got the kind of power which no previous regime in China has had since Deng. Uh, so, uh, President Xi, I think his objective from his high point of calm serenity, almost Buddhist rather than communist approach to regional, internal, and world affairs. I think he wants to be seen as the only adult left in the room when the wreckage is being counted. And at that moment, he would then use that positioning in order to again further increase China's relevance in the new emerging world order. That would be China's objective. And it's a very credible objective. We should not scoff at it at all. It's a very credible because China will not waste its military capabilities on anyone else's war. It holds it in reserve and watching. I think the one of the biggest beneficiaries, collateral beneficiaries of this conflict will be China because tomorrow, already perhaps, China's arms industry is going to head for a boom as people turn to China for next. Japan has done something absolutely remarkable by the standards of the history of Japan. It has ended pacifism. It has just passed a law by which Japan can now export lethal arms. And that means Japan is already very nimble, very sure footed, very quick off the block in its effort to become part of the next arms boom market. Russia is going to be a very big gainer. I can see its S-500s now rising in demand, its planes now coming into demand. And I suppose I can sense that President Putin may now want to wind up his Ukraine options quickly to take whatever territory he can in Donbas region and then declare his own sort of ceasefire and pause the war or will then wait for time to create new realities which are recognized by the world. So, but in this emerging world, America's position is going to be far weaker than it was before this conflict. Europe didn't have a position because it had basically become a paper cat, not even a tiger, because you know it refused to spend anything on defense after the end of the Warsaw fall of the Warsaw Pact in 1990. So Europe is not a fact. So where are the principal players left? The principal players will be Russia, China, Japan, and if India can get its act together, we could be a very big beneficiary if we now can produce and work very, very fast to create a defense industry which can hope to find a place in the emerging vacuum.
Defense exports are growing significantly. That's what the data says, Mr. Akbar. But is
Yes,
it
but
growing strategically? That's the question. What is your assessment?
yeah, but those figures are a bit fallacious because they reflect a very low base. We have to take a quantum leap, literally a quantum leap, from 1 up to 21 without waiting for the twos and the threes and so on. And are we ready for that? Government must take a very, very quick, immediate effort through the required legislation, through the required investment, because we have the people, we have the entrepreneurs, we have the industrialists, we have the skills, we have the talent, we have the knowledge, we have everything. We've got to get the act together and pick up the orders which we are in a position to supply and supply them faster and at a lower price than the competition.
That brings me to my last question that I wanted to ask you in this interview, Mr. Akbar. Uh, if you look at India, as you just spoke about how India should be nimble, how India should be swift in taking advantage of this situation and building a indigenous military industrial complex. Let's talk a little bit about Indian diplomacy. In the course of the entire Iranian conflict or Iran war, how do you see the role of Indian diplomacy? Has Indian diplomacy been nimble, or have we, in some senses, been caught off guard?
Indian diplomacy, Indian foreign policy is based on a very strong philosophical foundation. We are not students of Europe's balance of power thesis. Our strength lies in the power of balance. Our strength lies in the good that a benevolent state can do for the region, for itself, and for the world to the extent that it is possible. Right? We have credibility in this region. We have credibility even in this particular war on both sides. A few days ago, at the height of the conflict or its tensions, uh, the our national security advisor, who's really playing a very major role in on India's part in world affairs, he was in Saudi Arabia, right? Taking that bridge forward, maintaining that bridge, strengthening it even further for the future. Uh, we, the evidence that we have good equation with Iran, already the world has seen that we were among Iran early responders in the sense of getting our ships through. And, so there is a lot of goodwill that India can use in order to say play a very significant part in the creation of the world. But most important, perhaps, is a accidental opportunity. This year, India leads BRICS, and BRICS can play a very, very important part in creating the international rules-based order is born. Not least because those members who were the guardians of security have tended to play havoc with the rules, right? The United Nations is a dead duck. When I say dead duck, I don't want to embarrass any existing duck, right? the, the military alliances have withered. NATO has withered, Warsaw Pact has gone. Right? We need a new architecture for world stability, global stability.
I want to
And
ask you
India
something there, Mr.
must
Akbar.
play a part in that.
And I want to ask you something there, since you mentioned BRICS. There's been a lot of speculation on what is the future of the Quad. And do you think the Quad is also dead in water?
Not at all. The court has its limited role. I mean, The importance of the Quad is in keeping a war away from Malacca Straits. Right? Hormuz is gone.
Absolutely. Now more than ever
Suez,
before. Absolutely.
Suez is morbid. Right? We are going to keep traveling around the Cape of Good Hope. What do we do if Malacca also becomes conflicted or tension? Right? The Quad's job, very well articulated, has been to keep, as I said, oil is impotent without water.
Mm.
You can produce energy, but unless you can take energy to its destination, energy is a storage dump. So I think the relevance of port is extreme. BRICS can also think about creating an alternative or a parallel trading currency. I think that will certainly be on the agenda. Already we have purchased Iranian oil with yuan, Chinese currency, because they won't accept ours. And we are India and Russia are using their own currency mechanisms, and so on and so forth. So the world, as I said, it's in great flux. India can be a very important part. The Prime Minister himself, he has tremendous credibility. The Prime Minister can be a very important personality and a force in helping to reorganize a crumbling world.
On that note, Mr. Akbar, we'll have to wrap it up there. Thanks very much. As always, a real pleasure talking to you about a wide array of issues, especially about the Iran war. No doubt, as things progress, we will get more opportunities to discuss these things with you. But for now, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Hindol.